Mr. Speaker said, sections 1 and 2 of section 305 of the Constitution, as read in subsection 1 of section 28 of the Public Affairs, all the stakeholders will instrument
sustainability, underscoring government's commitment to promoting durable and enduring macroeconomic stability, characterized by low and stable ZIG inflation. Mr. Speaker, I now want to turn to global economic developments, focusing on growth specifically. Global growth is projected to moderate from 3.3% in 2024 to 3.2% in 2025 and to 3.1% in 2026, reflecting obviously slower growth and heightened trade uncertainty and geopolitical tensions. I do have some slides on the screen. If you look up, I hope it's visible to all, you can see a few countries up there, advanced economies, United States, Euro, Germany, China, India, to mention a few, UK, and you can see the growth rates, where India is leading the pack with a growth rate of over 6%, followed by China, just over 4%. The sub-Saharan Africa region is expected to register growth of 4.1%, both in 2024 and 2025, before edging up to 4.4% in 2026. On the other hand, economic growth in the SADC region, which is our region, is projected to improve from 2.6% in 2024 to 2.9% in 2025 and to 3% in 2026. Again, you can see the slide up there showing various countries from the SADC region, and Zimbabwe I think they skipped the other slide, showing a growth of 6.6% in 2025 rather, and then 5% in 2026. Strong growth indeed, Mr. Speaker said. While this marks a moderate recovery, growth remains softer than expected due to persistent global headwinds, weak external demand and energy deficits that are afflicting a few countries, and also is due to financing constraints. What I have up there, Mr. Speaker, is a chart showing a global inflation which seems to be headed downwards. This is positive. It may mean that global interest rates beyond 26 will come down, making it cheaper for us to access loans globally. A comment on international commodity prices. Following several years of volatility, global economic prices are generally expected to move sideways, if not slightly decline. This is in both 2025 and 2026. But I must make an exception in the sense that gold, which is silver, the precious metals are faring better than, in fact, they're doing very well compared to basic metals. You can see the chart there for precious metals are streaking upwards exponentially. But the prior chart, which was showing the oil price, was curving downwards, which is good for us since we're a net oil importer. Now, let me turn to the domestic economy, the Zimbabwe economy. Mr. Speaker said, the domestic economy exhibited strong performance during the first half of the year, which is estimated to have grown by 8.1%. You can see in the first quarter of the second bar from your right, Q1, the economy grew at 5.1%. In the second quarter, which is the last bar on your right, the economy grew at 11.04%. The average is 8.1%, so strong growth indeed. The domestic economy is therefore now projected to achieve a growth rate of 6.6% in 2025, as I've already mentioned. This revised projection is primarily on account of strong recovery in agriculture and other sectors such as mining, but all sectors are doing well. They are all in positive territory, Mr. Speaker. There's a chart with all manner of figures up there showing the growth rates of various sectors. You can see agriculture growing at 24% this year, and then information and communication growing at 12.5%. Those are the sort of star performers, followed by mining and quarrying 7.3%, and so forth. Overall growth 6.6%. Following the national accounts revaluation exercise by Zimstat, nominal GDP in 2025 is projected at $52.4 billion US dollars, resulting in a gross national income per capita, or GNI per capita, of $3,200 US dollars per person per year. In 2026, economic growth is projected at 5%, underpinned by the following assumptions. One, expected normal to above normal rainfall with irrigated cropping expected to boost the performance of the agricultural sector. Two, currency and exchange rate and price stability. Prudent fiscal policy and tight monetary policy will anchor the currency and the exchange rate and inflation stability. Three, focusing on steady international mineral commodity prices. Most commodity prices are expected to moderate, except for gold prices. Low fuel prices will reduce the domestic cost of production, while higher prices for gold will promote further mining sector growth, increasing foreign currency inflows. And finally, on the ease of doing business, Mr. Speaker said, the ongoing review and rationalization of the various licenses, fees and charges is expected to continue, with the overall impact of lowering domestic costs of production and doing business and improving national and global competitiveness for local products. Let me turn to inflation development, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, inflation developments in 2025 reflect the cumulative positive impact of prudent fiscal policy, sustained tight monetary policy, and proactive money supply growth management by the central bank, the RBZ. In terms of inflation, month-on-month ZIG inflation was minus 0.4%, while annual inflation was at 32.7% in the month of October 2025. The figure for November came out yesterday, Mr. Speaker. Month-on-month ZIG inflation is at about 0.2%, and then year-on-year ZIG inflation is at 19%. So I'm confident, Mr. Speaker, that before year end, you will see an inflation level of closer to 10% and single-digit inflation in the first quarter of next year. And if this happens, Mr. Speaker, that will be the first time we've achieved that kind of single-digit domestic inflation since 1997. In 2026, the ZIG annual inflation, let me take that again, the US dollar month-on-month inflation and year-on-year inflation was 0.3% and 13% respectively in the month of October 2025. In 2026, the ZIG annual inflation rate is projected to decline to single-digit levels, reflecting anchored inflation expectations, currency and exchange rate volatility, as well as strengthened monetary fiscal policy coordination. Let me turn to the external sector, Mr. Speaker. What I have there is a chart of the exchange rates. You can see that spread between the parallel and the official rate has remained steady, within the 20% band. That has helped us a lot in managing activities in the parallel market, which have caused us some challenges in the past. Let me turn to the external sector. Mr. Speaker, during 2025, the country's external position improved as a result of significant foreign currency inflows, estimated at 12 billion during the first 9 months of the year of 2025. During the same period, exports and imports amounted to $7 billion US dollars. There's a table there showing the various figures. As a result, the current account surplus was at $961.3 million US dollars during the first 6 months of 2025. This is compared to 31 million recorded during the same period last year, 2024. A massive increase in the current account surplus. To year end, the current account surplus is projected at 1.3 billion US dollars. This surplus is expected to further increase to 1.4 billion in 2026, underpinned by sustained export growth and strong diaspora inflows. Let me say a word about the diaspora inflows or remittances. Diaspora inflows, Mr. Speaker, have remained strong in the main, reflecting global economic strength and recovery. Billion in 2025 and 2.8 billion in 2026, up on the charts. Let me turn to public finance developments, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, revenue collections during the period January to September 2025 amounted to 156.3 billion ZIG, while expenditures were at 152.5 billion ZIG. With the fiscal framework right up there. On a cash basis, revenues which exceeded expenditures by 3.7 billion were utilized for partial repayment of some of the outstanding government loan obligations. In US dollar terms, revenue collections amounted to 5.9 billion against expenditures of 5.7 billion US dollars. As of September 2025, various ministries, departments and agencies had utilized an average of 56% of their allocations. However, due to the actual exchange rate outturn of 26.7 ZiG to $1 compared to the assumed budget exchange rate of 36 ZiG to $1, which we used when we did the budget last year, actual average utilization stands at 75% across our various MDAs. What does the fiscal outlook look like to year-end, Mr. Speaker, sir? Cumulative revenue collections to year-end are projected at 215.7 billion, or 7.96 billion, which is really close to 8 billion, Mr. Speaker, sir. This is against expenditures of 219.46 billion ZiG, or 8.1 billion US dollars, resulting in a projected budget deficit of 3.8 billion ZiG, or 140.1 million US dollars, which is 0.3% of our gross domestic product, GDP. Coming to public debt, Mr. Speaker, sir, the country's stock of public and publicly guaranteed debt was 622.3 billion ZiG, or 23.4 billion US dollars, which is about 44.7% of our gross domestic product, GDP, as of the end of September 2025. Let me turn to the 2026 national budget macro fiscal framework, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, in 2026, government is targeting to collect revenues amounting to 288 billion ZiG, or 16.9% of GDP, or about 9.4 billion US dollars equivalent. The revenue envelope, coupled with the government's borrowing capacity, provides for an overall global expenditure amounting to 290 billion ZiG, or 9.5 billion US dollars, which translates to 17% of our GDP. The projected revenue collection and expenditure ceiling results in an almost balanced budget, with a small budget deficit of only 3.2 billion ZiG, or 105.9 million US dollars, or minus 0.2% of GDP, all within the static target of 3% of GDP, Mr. Speaker, sir. A word about domestic partners who have supported us. Mr. Speaker, sir, the country received development assistance amounting to 386.1 million during the period January to September 2025, against a target of 500 million US dollars. Of course, we thank our development partners for these resources. In 2026, development assistance is projected at 350 million, a 30% drop from the 2025 projection, attributed to recent developments which have resulted in a global decrease in official development assistance flows. Let me turn to the strategic priorities for the 2026 national budget. Mr. Speaker, sir, the 2026 national budget is anchored on the 10 national priorities of the National Development Strategy 2, NDS 2, which are as follows: macroeconomic stability and financial sector deepening, inclusive growth and structural transformation, infrastructure development and housing, agriculture, food security, climate and environment. That's the fourth one. Fifth one, science, technology, digitization, innovation, and human capital development. Then job creation, youth entrepreneurship and development, creative industries and culture. Then social development, gender and social protection. 7, regional development and inclusivity through devolution and decentralization. That was number 8, by the way. 9, image building, international relations and trade. And finally, number 10, good governance, institution building, peace and security. During the budget consultations, the various ministries, departments and agencies submitted bids of over 828.5 billion ZiG, which is way above the available capacity of the economy, amounting to 253 billion ZiG. So the bids were almost 3.5 times what was available or what the economy could generate. And this is what is being distributed to our various ministries, departments and agencies. Up on the screen, you'll see the various distributions, but I'll go through each of them one by one because they are all aligned to the 10 pillars in NDS2, which I've already mentioned. I must hasten to say, Mr. Speaker, that in the first half of any year, the revenue inflows are typically below the annual average run rate. In order to align expenditure with seasonality of the revenue collections, the budget will be executed on the basis of a conservative annual revenue projection of $9 billion in the first half of the year, with expenditure ceilings for votes calibrated to the typical in-year revenue pattern and reflected in the cash release plan. This will help ensure that expenditure remains fully financeable, that no new payment arrears are incurred, and that unbudgeted for expenditures are curtailed. Should revenue collections in the first half of the year exceed this seasonal baseline, expenditure ceilings will be accordingly be adjusted in the second half of the year in a transparent manner within the approved appropriations and in line with clearly communicated priorities. Let me turn to the 10 priority areas under NDS2, which also drive the budget allocations. Mr. Speaker, the 2026 national budget seeks to consolidate and sustain macroeconomic stability beyond the near term. This really speaks to the pillar of macroeconomic stability and financial sector deepening. Turning to the pillar of inclusive economic growth and structural transformation, the focus of this budget is to sustain structural transformation through value addition and beneficiation, prioritizing job creation, expanding the digital economy, and embedding climate adaptation and resilience. Turning to industry within this pillar, in view of the manufacturing sector's strategic role in driving structural transformation, the government has set aside 459.8 million ZiG for the Ministry of Industry and Commerce to support tooling and working capital requirements of the industry, as well as for improvement of the policy environment. What I have up there, Mr. Speaker, is a chart which is an index of volume from the manufacturing sector. You can see it's been trending upwards, and we would like this to continue through these budget allocation to improve policy and to trigger certain incentives within the industrial sector. Turning to the mining sector, in support of sustainable mining development in 2026, a total of 789 million ZiG has been set aside for the Ministry of Mines and Mining Development in order to enhance its operations that serve to promote beneficiation and value addition. I now want to turn to the tourism sector while I'm on the issue of structural transformation. To support the growth trajectory in the tourism sector, a budget allocation of 339.4 million ZiG has been set aside to bolster the operations of the Ministry of Tourism and Hospitality. This will cement Zimbabwe as a destination of choice. Mr. Speaker, recently we were voted or chosen as the #1 destination by Forbes magazine. This we must sustain. And you can see, Mr. Speaker, on the chart up there, the recovery in tourism, in domestic tourism, since 2020 has been a remarkable turnaround indeed. Let me turn to the pillar of agriculture, food security, climate and environment. Mr. Speaker, the 2026 national budget supports the strengthening of food security, climate resilience and environmental protection is key to sustainable development. For agriculture specifically, the 2026 national budget has set aside 26.8 billion ZiG for the Ministry of Lands, Agriculture, Fisheries, Water and Rural Development for the following programs and projects, among others, of course. Agriculture Productive Social Protection Scheme, which is the Fumvuza Interest Program, Rural Development 8.0 in industrialization, for irrigation development, for dam construction, livestock production, and procurement of strategic grain reserves. A word on climate change management, the Ministry of Environment, Climate and Wildlife has been allocated an amount of 510.2 million ZiG to implement climate change management programs and projects. I now turn to the pillar of job creation, youth entrepreneurship and development, and creative industry and culture. Mr. Speaker, sir, the government is seized with the task of growing the job market to absorb new entrants, as well as creating conditions for youth enterprise development and innovation. The 2026 national budget has set aside 1.7 billion ZiG for the Ministry of Youth Empowerment, Development and Vocation Training towards youth empowerment initiatives and programs, and for capitalization of the Empower Bank. Turning to sports, recreation, arts and culture. Under sports, recreation, arts and culture, the national budget has set aside 841.4 million ZiG for the Ministry of Sports, Recreation, Arts and Culture to support activities, including the completion of the outstanding works at the National Sports Stadium, as well as upgrading and construction of other sporting facilities, support the arts and cultural facilities across the country. I now turn to the pillar of social development, gender and social protection. Mr. Speaker, sir, the government seeks to build a just and inclusive society through investing in quality education and healthcare, among other essential services, in order to foster human capital development, social cohesion, and resilience against poverty and vulnerability. So looking at the health sector, within this pillar, an amount of 30.4 billion ZiG has been allocated to the Ministry of Health and Child Care through the 2026 national budget. This is meant to strengthen primary health care by improving access to quality health care, particularly in rural and underserved areas, and to develop health infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, so there's wonderful progress in terms of renovating some of our infrastructure at the Parerenya group of hospitals. That's underway. And this budget allocation, Mr. Speaker, is in line with the Abuja target of 15% being allocated to the health sector, 15% of total revenue or total budget. Turning to primary and secondary education, the 2026 national budget has set aside 47.4 billion ZiG for the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education. This will go towards employment costs, provision of basic education, infrastructure upgrading and construction, and equipping schools, including those in disadvantaged areas, to ensure that all students have access to education facilities in accordance with international conventions. The picture up there is some equipment from the NMS Health Infrastructure Development Program, which saw us develop resulted in the development of the Harare South Health Facility and Runyararo Health Facility, and also the Calgary Park Health Facility. It's one of the programs that we're running under the Ministry of Health. I now turn to the issue of social protection. The 2026 national budget has set aside 12.7 billion ZiG for the Ministry of Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare to cushion the vulnerable with educational fees and medical assistance, as well as improving food security, among others. I now turn to the support we're giving to our veterans of the liberation struggle. The Ministry of Veterans of the Liberation Struggle Affairs has been allocated 1.1 billion ZiG to cover essential needs such as monthly gratuities, medical benefits, educational assistance, funeral grants, as well as for veterans empowerment programs, and ensuring continued support for this important constituency. Let me turn to the issue of women and gender equity promotion. The Ministry of Women's Affairs, Community, Small and Medium Enterprises has been allocated 1.1 billion ZiG towards the following, among other areas, of course: 152.3 million ZiG towards the capitalization of Women's Microfinance Bank. And this is just the beginning. To 70.4 million ZiG for capitalization of the Women's Development Fund. 74.7 million for construction of safe markets for women and children. And finally, 152.3 million ZiG for capitalization of the Small to Medium Enterprises Development Corporation, SMEDCO. Let me turn to the pillar of infrastructure development and housing. Mr. Speaker, sir, the 2026 national budget prioritizes investment in public infrastructure projects with the focus on high economic and high social returns, enhancing trade competitiveness and promoting digitization. Looking at the transport sector, in 2026 national budget, an allocation of 4.6 billion for the Ministry of Transport and Infrastructure Development for the rehabilitation and upgrading of roads and upgrading of modern airports has been set aside. Some of the flagship projects include the completion of the Harare-Masingo Bybridge Road and the upgrading of the Bulawayo-Victoria Falls Road. This is Manyame and Muchege bridges up on the screen, Mr. Speaker, so you can see there's progress everywhere. Let me mention the energy sector. The Minister of Energy and Power Development has been allocated 330.3 million ZiG to spearhead the implementation of strategic policy instruments and frameworks to guide energy planning and investment. Government will continue to promote investment in the energy sector with particular focus on electricity generation and distribution for both public and private sector, including triple Ps and also the net metering program. On water and sanitation, a total of 1.1 billion ZiG has been set aside to support water and sanitation projects and programs in 2026, with particular focus on Kunzwi and Gaishangani dams, as well as borehole drilling programs. That's a picture of the Gaishangani dam, and there's steady progress. When it comes to housing, the budget has set aside 948.9 million ZiG for the Ministry of National Housing and Social Amenities to enhance the legal and regulatory framework governing land use, housing delivery, and urban planning. These resources will also support investments in both off-site and on-site infrastructure, such as roads, water, sewage, electricity, which are critical enablers for all new housing projects across the country. I think that's the WEDA District Composite Office, which is one of the projects that is almost completed, basically. Turning to science, technology, digitalization, innovation, and human capital development, Mr. Speaker, the 2026 national budget has set aside 763.5 million ZiG for the Ministry of Information, communication technology, postal and courier services. This will enable the ministry to support and facilitate strategic investments in science, technology, digitization, innovation, and human capital development, which is critical in fostering a knowledge-driven, digitally enabled and technology-transformed economy. Looking at higher and tertiary education, innovation, science and technology, an amount of 10.3 billion ZiG has been set aside for the Ministry of Higher and Tertiary Education, Innovation, Science and Technology Development in order to support our Education 5.0 agenda. You can see progress with innovation hubs in Chinhoyi and also at HIT, Harare Institute of Technology. Those are fully functional. These resources will capacitate institutions of higher learning, expand infrastructure requirements and support innovation hubs, such as one you've seen, and agro-industrial parks in order to strengthen the country's innovation ecosystem. Turning to skills audit and development, the 2026 national budget has set aside resources amounting to 229 million ZiG to support the Ministry of Skills Audit and Development in its mandate to build a competitive, innovative and adaptive workforce capable of driving Zimbabwe's industrialization, digitization, digital transformation and inclusive growth. Let me turn to regional development and inclusivity through devolution and decentralization. Mr. Speaker, sir, an allocation of 4.6 billion ZiG has been set aside for the Ministry of Local Government and Public Works for the refurbishment and construction of government buildings for disaster relief, as well as strengthening governance and oversight role of the lower tiers of government. In addition, in compliance with Section 264 and 301 of the Constitution, which requires an allocation of at least 5% of the revenue collections to the lower tiers of government, a total of 14.4 billion ZiG has been set aside for devolution and decentralization in 2026. Turning to good governance, institution building, peace and security, Mr. Speaker said the 2026 budget, Mr. Speaker said in 2026, government seeks to enhance effective governance processes to promote transparency and accountability, as well as creating a conducive environment for inclusive growth and development. Looking at peace and security specifically, the 2026 national budget has set aside 46.8 billion ZiG for the security sector, for hiring and training of personnel, provision of consumables and rations, construction and rehabilitation of staff accommodation, and procurement of operational and conditions of service vehicles. This also includes resources to capitalize the security sector's strategic business units, including the implementation of the military salary concept, as well as a very successful program for landmine clearance. Turning to justice delivery, the Ministry of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs has been allocated 6.9 billion ZiG to enhance justice delivery and access, alignment and harmonization of legislation, advancing of decentralization of justice services to provinces and districts, and implementing the intellectual property policy. That's the judicial or commercial court. It's beautiful. On image building and international relations and trade, in line with the national thrusts on image building, engagement and re-engagement, the 2026 national budget has set aside 3.9 billion for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Trade to promote the country's image as a credible investment destination while fostering beneficial partnerships that contribute to sustainable growth and development. Looking at information, publicity and broadcasting, I think that's the Osaka Expo, Mr. Speaker, said we had a very popular stand and we won. Turning to information, publicity and broadcasting, an amount of 463.1 million ZiG has been set aside for the Ministry of Information, Publicity and Broadcasting Services to finance digital migration, transmission network upgrades, and capacity development programs for media institutions and practitioners. This is meant to accelerate digitization within the broadcasting and communication ecosystem through the continued rollout of the ZIM Digital Phase 2 program. I urge members of Parliament to visit Montrose Studios. It's very modern, it's digital. That's where all our indigenous languages are broadcast from, very modern, and want to replicate that at Pockets Hill and everywhere else. Turning to Parliament, as in our ultimate oversight institution for the executive, the 2026 national budget has set aside 3.1 billion ZiG for the Parliament of Zimbabwe to undertake its legislative and oversight role. This includes funding for operations, Constituency Development Fund, CDF, vehicle loan schemes, and other activities that will aid Parliament in the execution of its mandate. Parliament constituency information centres will also be funded in the 2026 national budget. I now turn to the Auditor General's office, Mr. Speaker, sir. In order to undertake its mandate, the Office of the Auditor General requires resources to meet its operational and capital expenditure requirements. In this regard, 764.4 million ZiG has been allocated to the Office of the Auditor General for the 2026 fiscal year. The resources will cater for employment costs, capacity building, digitization, as well as rehabilitation and upgrading of Barrows House building, which is their head office. I now turn to other independent institutions, Mr. Speaker, sir. For example, the Public Service Commission, the budget of 11.4 billion, Judicial Services Commission, 1.4 billion, Health Service Commission, 305.9 million, Office of the Attorney General, 304.9 million, Council of Chiefs, 200.3 million. This is all ZiG. Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission, 256.4 million ZiG. The National Prosecuting Authority, NPA, 545.4 million ZiG. Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, ZAC, 248.1 million ZiG. Zimbabwe Electoral Commission at 514.8 million ZiG. Zimbabwe Gender Commission at 167.8 million ZiG. Zimbabwe Land Commission, a budget of 245.3 million ZiG. And finally, Zimbabwe Media Commission with a budget of allocation of 159.2 million ZiG. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the matter of ease of doing business, looking at reforms towards the ease of doing business. Mr. Speaker, before I move on to revenue measures, let me take this opportunity to update the House on progress being made thus far to review levies, fees, charges in order to improve the environment for doing business. I'm happy to announce that Cabinet has so far approved reforms in the following 5 of 12 sectors. 1, the livestock, dairy and feedstock manufacturing. This was approved on the 5th of August this year. For the tourism sector, the approval was on the 26th of August. For the transport sector, approval was on the 9th of September. And for the wholesale and retail sectors, approval was on the 7th of October. And the energy sector approval was basically last week, which is in November. Some of the approved reforms will be gazetted through the finance bill for 2026, while others will be gazetted individually through statutory instruments and other legal reforms by the respective line ministries. So you will see the legal provisions coming through from various angles, but all focusing on the already announced reforms. Government's target is to complete the review of the outstanding 7 sectors by the end of the first quarter of 2026. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to revenue measures. Mr. Speaker, the 26 national budget revenue measures seek to consolidate the gains achieved under the National Development Strategy 1 and lay the foundation for transition to NDS 2. The proposed measures are targeted at supporting productive sectors, provide relief to taxpayers, and minimize avoidance and evasion, whilst ensuring fairness, efficiency, and simplicity in the tax system. I now present a summary of some of the revenue measures. The detail is in the detailed budget statement. Let's look at the issue of broadening the tax base. Royalty on gold. In order to ensure the mining sector contributes a fair share of revenue to the fiscus during periods of commodity price boom, as well as to eliminate arbitrage between categories of miners, I propose to harmonize and review the royalty structure of all gold producers in the following manner. Up on the screen, you can see that the royalty will now be linked to the price level or price category. So with a gold price per ounce of 0 to $1,200 the royalty is 3%. From 1,201 to 2,500, the royalty goes up to 5%. For 2,501 and above, the royalty is 10%. This will ensure that a government is able to share on the upside of any price increases. I now turn to an issue of enhancing efficiency in VAT collection, which is about enhancing taxation of e-commerce. Mr. Speaker, I propose to introduce a digital services withholding tax in lieu of existing VAT on imported services for payments made to offshore digital platforms, including e-hailing fees, online content charges, and satellite-based internet access fees. The tax will be withheld by paying agents that includes financial institutions. I now turn to an issue of structural transformation, looking at value addition in the cotton sector. Consistent with ongoing improvements in local production capacity of fabrics, I propose to review and align the customs duty rate on selected polyester staples fibers with dyed woolen fabrics of cotton at a rate of 40%, plus $2.5 US dollars, or $2.50 per kg, in addition to the 40%. I now turn to the issue of manufacturing of production of gas cylinders, where again the country is making good progress, Mr. Speaker. In order to reduce the cost of producing gas cylinders, thereby stimulating local production, leveraging the playing field between imported and locally manufactured products, I propose to remove customs duty on selected imported raw materials that include steel coils and plates. Let me turn to some tax relief measures, Mr. Speaker. Let me talk about the tax incentives for a 24-hour economy notion. To support the transition towards a 24-hour production economy, I propose to introduce targeted tax incentives for firms operating extended production or service hours in the manufacturing sector, where such operators demonstrate incremental production and revenue thereof. Discussions are ongoing with various stakeholders, relevant stakeholders, on the modalities of the proposed framework, targeting, among others, the following incentives. 1, additional tax deductions on selected expenditure incurred during extended hours or extended operational hours. 2, accelerated wear and tear allowances on plant and equipment used in round-the-clock production cycles. And finally, 3, priority access to import duty concessions for firms that demonstrate capacity for expansion and productivity improvements under the 24-hour economy model. I now turn to the review of the Intermediated Money Transfer Tax, IMTT, otherwise known as the 2% tax. Mr. Speaker, sir, consistent with government commitment to supporting business growth and maintaining fiscal stability, I propose to review the IMTT framework as follows. 1, to reduce IMTT rate on ZiG-denominated transactions from 2% to 1.5% in order to promote use of local currency and lower transactions costs. IMTT on foreign currency transactions will be maintained at 2% for now. Number 2, I propose to designate IMTT as a tax-deductible expense for purposes of corporate income tax and computation. And this applies to both ZiG and US dollar corporate income. Number 3, we want to expand the definition of financial institution for purposes of IMTT to include microfinance institutions. Let me turn to a compensatory issue. Mr. Speaker, sir, this review in IMTT will result in an immediate drop in revenues for the government. So as a compensatory mechanism, I propose that we introduce a small concession to partially compensate for this foregone revenue by increasing VAT by only 0.5% effective from 1 January 2026. I now turn to an issue of tax deductibility of interest, deposit interest for commercial banks. Mr. Speaker, in order to facilitate mobilization and retention of bank deposits, I propose to allow a tax-deductible expenditure, interest expense payable on such deposits made with financial institutions, subject to appropriate safeguards to prevent abuse, including transfer pricing rules, thin capitalization principles, and anti-base erosion measures. Let me turn to a new business sector, Mr. Speaker, called the Business and Knowledge Process Outsourcing Sector, BPO and KPO. Mr. Speaker, the government recognizes the surge in local investments towards establishment of business and knowledge process outsourcing, BKPO, services, where specialist services are provided to offshore consumers with the potential to significantly contribute towards employment creation, foreign currency generation, and investment in appropriate infrastructure. In order to support investment in the industry, I propose to introduce the following incentives. Suspension of customs duty on the importation of specialized equipment by qualifying business and knowledge process outsourcing operators. I propose a flat 15% corporate income tax rate in line with the domestic minimum top-up tax provisions, subject to meeting the prescribed conditions. I also propose a capital allowance deduction of 100% in the first year of use or operation. I also propose an exemption from non-resident tax on dividends. I also propose a tax credit of $1,500 per employee per annum on corporate income tax as prescribed under the Youth Employment Tax Incentive YETI framework. So if they employ youthful employees, by a strict definition, there's a tax credit, Mr. Speaker, for those who do so. Finally, a flat tax rate of 15% on skilled, essential expatriate staff. I now turn to, again, a new issue regarding the liberalization of the gold sector. In order to modernize the gold trade legal framework and support the use of gold as an alternative investment asset, I propose to expand the categories of persons who may lawfully possess or deal in gold to include authorized dealers, National Gold Refinery, and individuals in possession of certified gold bars acquired through these institutions or these entities. Furthermore, I propose that holders of certified gold bars subject to the Exchange Control Act be allowed to pledge, exchange, sell, barter, or otherwise transact in these gold bars. This reform will facilitate the introduction of regulated, traceable investment-grade gold products, thereby offering citizens a secure store of value. I now move to the conclusion of the budget speech, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the year 2025 marks the end of the NDS 1 implementation period, with indications that most of the NDS 1 targets were achieved. One critical milestone achieved during the NDS 1 period is the introduction of the local currency, the ZiG, on the 4th of April last year, 2024, which has restored price stability and macroeconomic stability. This was achieved through concerted efforts by both the monetary and fiscal authorities. It is very important to stay the course, therefore, in order to sustain the stability which is critical for the attainment of Vision 2030. This is achievable if all stakeholders have a unit of purpose of economic transformation so that growth is shared through the creation of decent jobs with decent incomes, while vulnerable members of the society are equally taken care of through transparent and credible social protection programs. As the Nobel laureate in economics, Joseph Stiglitz, asserts that sustainable economic growth and shared prosperity requires us to build institutions and policies that are inclusive, resilient, and forward-looking. This national budget embodies that vision, anchoring our progress on fiscal discipline, infrastructure investment, and social empowerment to transform our economy towards achieving the aspirations of Vision 2030 of an upper middle income economy. Mr. Speaker, I finally commend this 2026 national budget to this august House in compliance with the law, and it is accompanied by the following documents: the 2026 national budget statement, the estimates of expenditure, otherwise known as the Blue Book, the Finance Bill, the Appropriation Bill, a report to Parliament on public debt, the 2026 Zimbabwe Infrastructure Investment Programme, the 2026 Citizens Budget, the Expenditure Arrears Clearance Strategy, which is Domestic Arrears Clearance Strategy, the 2024 Audit Implementation Metrics. For this one, I want Parliament to take note of what government has done in response to queries and issues raised by the Auditor General in the year of 2024. Finally, The 2026 National Gender Budget Statement is also included. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, say, Tinotenda, Seabonga, Twalumbwa.
The 2026 National Budget presentation right here in Mount Abden at the new Parliament building, being presented by the Ministry of Finance, Economic Development and
it's being focused on its economic growth, which goes in line with the NDS2, National Development Strategy 2, which was launched today by the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, His Excellency.
carried all over across the country. That includes road infrastructure development, the Harare Masvingo Bait Bridge Road, of course, talk of expansion of schools. And we got to see that the tourism sector also got major priority in terms of the budget allocation for 2026, given the fact that our Zimbabwean tourism was marked in the Forbes magazine that Zimbabwe is one of the best destinations, a must destination to visit. Also, the health sector also got prioritization, looking at the Parenya group of hospitals that they need renovations, talk of adequate medical facilities for the people of Zimbabwe.
Indeed, and one of the things that we should all know to Zimbabweans is that this budget affects every single Zimbabwean, from one who has just finished college to one who is about to retire, as all of these things affect us as citizens. Let's look at things like infrastructure development, which will be just highlighted right there. I will talk about infrastructure development. We're also going to note all the companies that are going to be involved in those projects, not forget
ease of doing business. And of course, on
order, I put the question that the debate be now adjourned. Those of that opinion will say aye. Those of the contrary opinion will say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The question is accordingly affirmed, and that the debate is now adjourned to what day, Honourable Leader of Government Business?
To Tuesday, the 9th of December, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you for your attendance. You may now leave.
all right, we are still right here in Mount Abden at the new Parliament building, where the 2026 National Budget presentation, and one of the key highlights is the issue to do with the ease of doing business. And of course, Honorable Professor Mthuli Ncube mentioned that there is need to reveal the levies that are there, licensing in several sectors of the economy, to ensure that people will be able to do business in the right manner. Looking at the small to medium enterprises in Zimbabwe, they constitute almost about 90% of businesses in Zimbabwe. And it's very, very important for the people of Zimbabwe to ensure that they do business without any hassles and any complications. Tawona.
Indeed, and as you just heard right there, when we talk about these levies and licenses being reviewed as well, it is not, and right now we can actually see the President, His Excellency Comrade E.G. Mnangagwa, just leaving right now. But as we were just discussing, you know, when we talk about the review of licenses, when we talk about the review, opportunities are being provided, more doors are
That's okay.